Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. John Douillard, and welcome to today's podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Heather Grzych. She's the author of the Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. She's a board-certified Ayurvedic practitioner. She bridges the worlds of conventional and alternative medicine to help women and men heal their physical and emotional lives. Heather is on the board of directors of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, consulted with doctors and governments and insurance companies. She lives in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and you can find out more about her and her book at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, HeatherGrzych.com. And we'll repeat that here at the end. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. You know, your book, when you sent it to me and asked me to do the forward, and I did the forward to her book, by the way, I was so excited to see a book that was written about, fertility and infertility from the Ayurvedic perspective, because for some odd reason, I ended up over the years treating a lot of women with infertility, women in their late 30s or mid 30s or early 40s, maybe because we have 6 kids and my wife's last baby was at 43. Everything was perfect. But I think Ayurveda does seem to have such logical, brilliant wisdom for understanding the basic premise of what causes this. I talked in the forward about a woman, a medical doctor, who came in here and she said she had to get pregnant within this period of time and this time at this month and have the baby and squeeze it in between the 6-week break with her medical practice. And I was like, babies don't do it like this. It doesn't work like that. There was such, and I think some of the major concerns we have is our culture is just going way too fast, and we don't nest. We don't have prenatal wisdom that Ayurveda had. And I think what you've written here is a book all about prenatal wisdom and really the understanding of how women can really maximize their fertility. And for men too. Now, all the research, you probably have seen it, Heather, is coming out saying men, who drink is just as bad as women who drink when prior to pregnancy or during pregnancy, or obviously for men prior to pregnancy or smoke. So these issues are not just for women, to be concerned about, but they're actually for men. And clearly Ayurveda was all about that for thousands of years. The men, their responsibility is to make sure the woman is safe and healthy, and prenatal preparation started a year or so, or at least 6 months before they even considered conceiving and conception. So there's so much to talk about here. So welcome. I would love to just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us what made you want to write this particular book.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm a huge fan of yours. And also, you were one of my teachers when I was in school. So this is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me to be here with you today. I wrote this book, I guess, because I wish that I had it when I was going through the process of trying to decide if I was going to be a mother, and if I was going to become a mother, how that would happen. I was one of the women who decided to have a child later in life. I had a lot of focus on my career when I was younger, and I was an athlete. So I was playing competitive softball till I was in my early 30s, and I was really into yoga. And the idea of having a child came up for me at 2 points in my life. Once when I was in my early 30s, when I was married. And then we tried to get pregnant for a few months, and then I got divorced and went for a few years without having a partner, and then had a new partner. And by that time I was in my late 30s and was really thinking how to be very mindful about this, because I knew it didn't work the first time I had tried it. And my life had changed so much in that time. So when I was in Ayurveda school, after leaving my corporate career that I was in for a long time, I spent a lot of my energy when I was in school learning about the feminine aspects of Ayurveda and learning, well, I'm a woman, so of course I would do that. So when my partner and I finally got around to having a child, we actually ended up getting pregnant on the first try. And I was almost 40 when I had my kid. And I had such a different experience in that time trying to get pregnant than I did years earlier when I was younger. So, supposedly it should have been easier for me to get pregnant when I was younger, but so much had changed in my life and in my health, my level of receptivity, because of what I learned through Ayurveda and also through yoga. So I had, what happened between those two time periods was I started a daily meditation practice, and I started studying Ayurveda, and I was doing yoga every day, and my whole life was changing. I remember walking down the street one day and going, oh, there's a plant there. And suddenly I started noticing all the plants. And I lived in a city, so that was obviously, I'm used to seeing concrete buildings, but suddenly I started to notice nature more. And so it was this reconnection back with nature that happened for me as I started studying Ayurveda. And as I started to learn more about my own body, I realized that I had been maybe programmed a little bit, not incorrectly. I don't know if I would say incorrectly, but I really started to question my programming when I started to think about becoming a mother. That was a big thing, the programming piece.
Do you think that, you as an athlete, do you think that had something to do with, I know that a lot of women, when they're, competitive, athletes, runners, triathletes, so on, they deplete their estrogen reserves, they get their estrogen checks, and they don't have any really to support a pregnancy. And I wondered if that was one of the factors that maybe you don't know, maybe you didn't get tested back then. And then all of a sudden the yoga and the meditation, just gave you that, we call it what Ayurveda Sattva, that ability to be still and calm on the inside that allows everything on the outside to function, more better, more holistically, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a simple concept, but I wondered if so what you're sort of saying is you stopped, you smelled the roses, you saw plants, you saw what was really around you, even though you were in a city, and you found that inner space, that inner silence that is where we come from, where we hail from. And if we don't have access to that inner space, which is like proportionally as void as intergalactic space, as Deepak Chopra used to say, it's such a powerful journey, and we're so forced in this culture to go outside to get our satisfaction. And it sounds like that's what you did, right? You went within, right?
Yeah. I can't say whether or not it was what the imbalance was in my early 30s. I really didn't delve into it deeply enough. I know that I had always had irregular menstrual cycles, and like all women that experience that, when they go to their doctor, they're told, oh, just go on the pill and it'll fix it. Just go on the pill and then you'll be normal. And you don't have to worry about that, whatever it is, whether a woman, for me, it was one issue. For a woman, it's another issue. They get pimples, they get heavy periods, they're not getting their period, whatever the issue is. Oh, just go on the pill and it'll solve this. And so I think I wasn't really aware of what the imbalance was, but I could tell you a little bit about the kind of person I was then. I could tell you that, I was eating a lot of meat, and I was exercising every day. And I was, when I did yoga, I didn't do yoga for a half an hour stretching in the morning. I did 2 to 3 hours of yoga every day. So it was kind of crazy.
Okay, you must have related to the medical doctor story then, huh?
I really did. So certainly there was a coming back into myself. And I have this really vivid moment of waking up hungover on a friend's couch one New Year's Day with my ex-husband when I was in my early 30s. This kind of actually started my awakening process and what led me to Ayurveda. I woke up and we had been drinking. It was New Year's Eve the night before. And I woke up like everybody does, right? When they're in your 30s and 20s on New Year's. And I woke up and I said, okay, I want to be happy and healthy this year. And then I said, oh crap, I said that last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, but I haven't done anything different. My life is exactly the same. And later that day, we were still over at this couple's house that we had slept over. We were at least responsible. We drank and, slept over their house. So I watched my friend in her garden, and she was just watering her plants. And then she was done watering her plants, and she just went and looked at this piece of lettuce, and she just looked at it. And the way she held it and the way she looked at it was, I said, what am I looking at? She just was looking at a piece of lettuce. And I said, I don't know what that is, but I need that. I don't know what to call that. I don't know. No one's ever taught me anything about that, but I need some of that in my life, that deep stillness and this deep connection with nature.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's so you sort of woke up and that started your journey into studying Ayurveda and looking into it, huh?
Yeah, that's what happened. And so I think when anyone in the middle of their life decides that they're going to change their career, I had to run sort of two parallel lives for a while. And that is taxing, but it's also good training for becoming a mother these days, especially if you're going to be a working mother, because when you're going to become a mother, you will have two jobs if you are working.
Yeah.
You certainly will.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So the story that you had, that when I first read your foreword, I was like, oh my God, he just knocked it out of the park. Because I felt like we're addressing something bigger with this book, even though certainly there's a unique situation. Every woman's fertility situation is so unique. What is going on in her body versus another woman's body, what is going on in her environment that influences her body is different than another woman's body. But collectively as women today, we're facing some things that maybe our mothers and our grandmothers didn't deal with.
Yeah.
And there's really a new mindset and a new skill set that has to be adopted that hasn't happened yet for women. It's almost like the pendulum has swung so far, maybe women going through empowerment, I'll call them movements of empowerment, that the pendulum has swung so far in this quest to achieve something that we've lost some of the things that were good and wonderful that made us unique as women, these gifts that we were born with. In the quest to become something or achieve something or be equal or.
I read a study not too long ago about estrogen in women, and estrogen is directly linked, according to the studies, to women's intuition. It makes them more aware. So they preserve, protect the baby. They're aware of danger before it happens. They know where not to go, where to go, where not to go. I 100% agree with you, is that the pendulum has shifted to this point to such an extreme place that, that the infertility rates are literally off the charts, and we have, real concerns. I think one study over, it's like 8,000 women, 8,800 women showed that 57% of them were actually looking into fertility, had fertility issues. That's just a crazy number that would actually be the case. And, and it's, is it, and can it be, like you said, everybody's different, but is the underlying theme that we're just going too fast, pushing ourselves too hard. And we know when we push ourselves too hard that estrogen levels are depleted. My daughter, who is 16 years old, she runs track, and she wasn't doing so well in track anymore and feeling really bad. We got our estrogen levels checked and they were in the tank. We have to give her iron and ferritin and natural sources of precursing estrogen, dial down our training, all these things, because we just push. And I remember giving a lecture many years ago in a panel discussion. It was on the East Coast somewhere. And it was about female health. And I was talking about how when the Ayurvedic doctors came to America, they said, why is it that all the women have menstrual problems here? We don't have that back home. Now, they have some really, I think, weird issues with putting women aside and having them menstruate in seclusion. And I have a lot of issues with some of the way Indian culture evolved. and I think we're going clearly in the right direction. But one of the things that women definitely did do is they respected that the movement of energy was going down during the menstrual cycle. And if you then make it go up and run a marathon, you're borrowing Peter to pay Paul, and you're going to go into debt. And the reason why they realized was that women weren't respecting the natural cycle where the body was going within, not to stop, but to go within, pull back the bow, become more self-aware, so they can then become more effective leaders. I really truly believe that women are the best leaders. They're the best. They're the hub in my family. They're the hub of our family. They're the center which everything revolves around. And in nature and in the animal kingdom, it's the same way. Men go out and do whatever, but the women are the ones with the babies, and they hang out with the family, and they keep it all together. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I think we sort of, in the name of equality, which I think is never going to happen because women are, in my mind, far superior in so many ways. And somehow, because men are stronger, they tell them that they have been in control of this whole plan. And I think it's a sort of a big mistake. But anyway, I didn't go over well when I gave that lecture about that. There was women were just so upset with me that I would say that women should rest during their cycle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just simply, nowadays, I think more and more people are starting to get it. Martina Navratilova, she, great tennis player, won numerous, titles to Wimbledon and all of that. And she told me that when she did the forward to my book, one of my books, and she told me that when she would play Wimbledon and she had her cycle was, happening at that time, she just knew it wasn't going to be on her game. And there were going to be a few games she just didn't have it. And she'd have to squeak through them, but there were times in her cycle where she was just all over it. And it all had to do with, the beautiful rhythms of nature that women are so deeply connected to and men aren't, and our culture isn't. And I think the influence of the respecting of these rhythms, now Nobel Prize winning science, is so critical. And that is, fundamental for getting pregnant and staying pregnant and having a healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy. So let's dive in a little deeper and go into, some of the things. What are some of the top things that you see that women can have on their radar when they're, I guess, number one, preparing for pregnancy, and then how they can, have the best, success during their pregnancy?
Like I said, I learn a lot from nature. I've learned so much from Ayurveda, but I think the thing that Ayurveda has done for me the most is to help me pay attention to nature more. And so when my partner and I first got together, we decided to take a trip together to the Galapagos Islands. And we went to see, the blue-footed boobies and all the birds, and we got to walk around the islands and observe the birds, and a lot of them were mating at that time. And I can't remember if I actually ended up it was in one draft of the book. I don't remember if it ended up, but I remember seeing these really elaborate rituals in person of the birds, doing these mirroring dances and kind of collecting twigs and sticks and clearing the space out. And it was just so amazing to see in person that I was like, oh, okay. There's this process that you have to go through in order to bring a life into the world well. And so Ayurveda has done such an amazing job to outline that, which is essentially treating yourself like you're a plant in a garden. I call it the 4 fertility factors. It's not called that in the ancient Ayurvedic texts, but the words are the same: the seed, the season, the field, and the water. And when we, both men and women, get more in tune with ourselves, if you can look at yourself like that, and you can look at the soul that you're going to bring onto the planet with that same eye, that especially for the woman, you are the channel that the new soul is coming through. So the field in the 4 fertility factors literally being her uterus and the care for the uterus, that is sort of the most direct correlation. But then the uterus lives within a larger field of her body, of her mind, her emotions, her house that she lives in, her relationship with her partner, the work that she does, the stress levels in her body, the community that she lives in, the planet that she's on and how healthy the planet is. And all of that is centering back into the influence on that field in her uterus. So all that is coming there. And the seed being the health of the egg and the sperm. Obviously, there's a lot of issues we know of with that now. Women are having children later, so the egg quality is changing. Men and women's health is becoming affected by stress, the way that we eat and live in our culture. And the sperm qualities are changing. So all of these signs of health and fertility in our culture they've been tanking for a while. So it's not just a problem of, oh gosh, women are, we're just too type A now. And, that's a part of it, but women are in a field. Women are in an environment that is either supportive or not supportive to their health and their baby's health. So cluing into those things, the seed, the season, the time of the life where the woman decides to have a child, the time of the month, where she is in her cycle, getting more in touch with the moon, the season. I know you've written a lot about the eating with the seasons, and a lot of people just don't even know that certain vegetables grow in certain seasons and certain fruits grow in certain seasons, and your body changes in the seasons. A lot of people don't even know that. So cluing your own awareness back into that and understanding the last piece of that, which is the water. And water in Ayurveda, you're probably aware, is the purpose of it is mixing. And in the body, it carries the hormones. So that's one of the purposes of that. But if you think about water on an energetic level, just interacting with people is like water. I mean, the oxytocin burst you can get from having a wonderful connection with someone. So thinking about it literally, but then also thinking about it as a metaphor, I think is really helpful. So the process that a woman would go through now, if she wants to become a mother and she wants to have a healthy child and she wants to be healthy at the end of it, and she wants her partner to be healthy at the end of it, and they want to have a good, great, wonderful life together, you can go through the steps that Ayurveda has laid out to balance your body, your environmental energies, your emotions before you try to conceive. Now, a lot of people get pregnant and they don't even think about it. They don't plan it. It just happens, and that's great too. But once a woman decides that, or not decides, once a woman notices that she is pregnant, then that energy can be put into the cultivation of her body and the baby's life as it grows.
The field is such a massive undertaking. When you put it the way you put it, was so beautiful that it just keeps expanding and expanding. So what are some of the ways that women can create, a better, more healthy Sattvic field?
Yeah. So first of all, a woman needs to understand her particular body and her own particular mind. And Ayurveda has done such a great job to help people understand that through understanding their constitutional type, through understanding the doshas and the patterns of imbalance in their own body, and learning how to eat, how to live, how to love, how to sleep, all in a way that creates the best functional outcome for their body. So, for example, in looking at Vata, Pitta, and Kapha as doshas, and when those are out of balance, any of those are out of balance in the body, is a sign that there's a lack of homeostasis, and looking at those, and then also looking at the Agni of the body and whether or not that's causing any toxic blockages that would, because a dosha being out of balance or ama in the body, either one of those could impede fertility. So understanding, and I know on your website you have some great tools for helping people understand their doshas and their imbalance patterns. So for example, if a woman finds that she's having kapha issues, which are slow and heavy and dense and wet, earthy, mucusy, in a cycle, you'd probably see like a lot of mucus, for example, tumors, things like that being present, cysts are common reproductive signs that there's excess kapha. The steps that Ayurveda would give to rebalance kapha, your black pepper, all the spices that can tend to rough up the body a little bit, the kind of tough love approach that kaphas often need, which the other constitutional types can't imagine going through because it would really hurt them right. In a very painful way. Sometimes the kaphas can benefit from that. So, understanding that maybe kaphas don't even need to sleep as much. And the problem is that when you look at everyone around you, you think, oh, I'm like everyone else. And I have to do, if in order for me to get pregnant, I have to do fertility yoga or something like that, which somebody made up, which is a bunch of yoga poses that might have worked for one person, but they're still not necessarily paying attention to what's going on in their own body. Why would you do that particular yoga pose? So for me, fertility yoga, for example, would be a yoga pose that's really beneficial for your particular situation. And so if you're dealing with a kapha issue, perhaps you're doing more back bends, or maybe yoga is not the right thing for you. If you're having a kapha issue, you are running instead of doing yoga, right? So those are some examples of some of the practices. And, it's a little unique for women with a cycle when you employ Ayurvedic treatments, because one, you have to figure out where you are in the cycle when things are happening. So the natural flows that change of blood and fluids to the reproductive organs, like you said, when the energy drops down at certain time, at that time of the month, when the uterus is filling, understanding that whatever you do when those other sort of monthly seasonal effects are happening is going to affect the quality of what is found in that part of the body. So if you know that after you ovulate, your uterus is filling with blood to start, supporting the potential new life that's going to come in, well, you have to think about it like, I'm cultivating this garden here right now. I'm cultivating the quality of the blood for this potential life that could come here. So understanding the balance of energies as they mix in your body to create that tissue. And the litmus test is always the menstrual cycle, because when the menstrual cycle comes out, you can see, when the menstrual blood comes out, you can see the evidence of how the last month went. It's very clear. How that goes is evidence of what happened earlier. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I always say that, in everything in Ayurveda, prevention starts a season or a cycle 2 or 3 before. If you're looking at not getting the flu, you're looking at that prevention took place not only in the fall, but what happened in that summer and what happened in that spring after the last, flu season. And all those things are just, part of the beautiful ebb and flow. I never thought of it like that, the menstrual cycle is the actual end of a cycle, just like the season is the end of a cycle, and everything accumulates at the end of each cycle. So you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly of your lifestyle based on looking at what happens at the end of every cycle, at the end of every year, like you said, maybe at the end of your New Year's Day, even though that's not actually nature's New Year. But the idea is at the end of every cycle, you have these opportunities to reflect and really see in a tangible way how you did and what happened. I think that's, really, really profound. You mentioned, well, let's talk about the seed for a second. That is such particularly with men and women as well. Are there any like major things that we know that are specifically, contributing to, low sperm count and weak sperm and eggs, either not being viable or whatever? Or anything just in terms of the lifestyle? I'm sure the field and the lifestyle carries over into the seed as well. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, if you look at our culture, the birth rates have been going down. And it's so interesting because when I was researching birth rates in other countries, I was really surprised to see birth rates in, Yemen and Syria and these places that were war-torn or had famine. They actually had really high birth rates. And yet us in this comfortable culture where we've got, we can drive up to a drive-through and pick up a hamburger or, pick up chips at midnight or whatever. We have access to so much food. And I just find it odd that where you have access to everything, the fertility somehow is getting clogged up for people. And, what is it about finding your, with men, for example, and women, it's like everybody has to find the right balance of energies in their own life. And stress is such a unique thing because everybody, so many people are doing yoga now because they don't want stress, but they're actually good kinds of stress. And that is an art form, I think, that's been lost. Understanding the good kinds of stress, the ones that activate you, the ones that make you, because in order to invoke your fertility and just to have good health in general, you want to be really in touch with your primal self, that primal aspect. And so, I guess I haven't seen anything about why other than stress. That's where all the research is. But what is it about stress that is causing that? When people are stressed, is it that something they're doing is causing stress or that their life is causing stress? So it's like, am I causing the stress or is my life causing the stress?
Yeah.
And
what about toxicity, issues? I mean, I read an article that talked about the vast majority of kids with cognitive issues when they're born, things like that, are boys, and they linked it to significant amounts of estrogen related to child development in the womb. And a lot of the toxic estrogens, environmental estrogens, xenoestrogens, and things like that. So I wondered if you ran across any studies that link, like with autism and things like that. Are there any studies that show that because we're living, because I totally get the lifestyle piece and all that. But what about just the flat out toxicity that we're exposed to? How many, endocrine disruptors are causing sperm-related, ovary-related, or egg-related issues, and are they a factor? And that women should be thinking about possibly, a real digestive reboot and a detox prior as part of their prenatal prep.
Yeah, I think I haven't come across the research. I'm not a research geek.
I am.
I know you are, and I love you for it. And I love reading your stuff, but it's certainly I'm not oriented that way to go out and seek the research. But, I think it's certainly a great idea for people to cleanse when you're talking about fertility. Cleansing is not necessary for everyone, but cleansing is necessary when there is a toxic buildup in the body. And there are clear signs when that's there for people. So all the, any digestive issues, clear signs that there's either a dosha out of balance, or there's, which environmental toxins can throw the doshas out of balance, because the toxin will have a certain property to it, and then that will change that level of dosha in the body. So certainly that will affect. And so if there is an imbalance, cleansing is necessary in order to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy child. And in fact, in Ayurveda, and one of the things, this, and I wrote about this in the book, is you want to prepare at least 3 months ahead of time. And, 6 or 9 or even 12 would be even better. Prepare both you and your partner to do the right, cleanse for your particular body, so that your tissues are just super healthy, strong, rejuvenated, that you've got the ojas, that great, clear flowing juice moving through the body, and strong and robust, especially for women, because our bodies go through so much when we have a child. Our bodies have to, and we're really lucky because nature made us like shapeshifters. The level of change that we go through on a monthly basis, and that we go through when we have a child. I mean, when I had a kid, I just couldn't believe it. And I'm kind of a geek, and it was one of my motivators to have a kid. I said, I want to see what this body can do. I feel like I'm missing out by not understanding this female experience while I'm here in this body.
Yeah.
So, there's so much change that's happening. And so you want to be very robust and bounce backable. I have a friend that made that word up, I think. I'll use it here, bounce backable. And men may not go through as much of a change, but you're both dealing with sleep deprivation after a baby's born. So make sure that you're having good sleep quality, is a good sleep hygiene before you have a child, because it's going to be really bad for you if you already have a sleep issue and then you have a kid and it's even worse, which I actually think is because I was older, having my only child. I was almost 40, and my partner was actually 51 when we had our kid. So that was actually the most difficult part, was how our sleep is so different when we're older, and how it's so much lighter. And he actually had a really bad sleep issue before, not really bad, but he had some troubles with sleep before we had our kid. And it was really bad for him after we had our child. It was really, really difficult and disruptive to his work. So.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. We had 6 kids, and every one of them slept in our bed. And at one point we had, our bed, and then a bed at the bottom, a base of our bed, another bed to the side of the bed, and we had a kid in each one, with one with us. And I mean, yeah, you just have to. Luckily, I was a deep sleeper. It definitely exposes the weak links. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I treat a lot of Indian patients from India that live here now, and I have so many of them come to me prior to their pregnancy and say, I want to get pregnant, can I prepare? And it's just something that I just don't get from my Western patients. They don't think about that. They come and they say, I'm pregnant, and what do I do? I mean, I get a little bit more and more, particularly with people who had a baby and then they're going into their next one, and then they want to prepare because they know, okay, we need to prepare for this because I went in last time a little unprepared. But it definitely is a cultural thing, and I think it's something that we need, that you're raising the awareness for sure, which is so critical. And I think also just about awareness, you talked about in Ayurveda, in the Gita, it says, and these are my favorite 4 words in all of the Vedic science, which is yogastha kuru kamani, which means first you establish being, and then you take action. So we pull back the bow, we become more self-aware. And then we act from that place of self-awareness. And I think from the point of view of the seed, from the point of view of the field, we have to pull back the bow first, become more self-aware, and take action from within. And that might be letting the delicate petals of our flower open a little bit to be a little bit more vulnerable and take a risk to be you in this crazy world and not to do what you think everybody's going to like. That's a beautiful journey as well. So I think that's such a great reminder, just to keep, explore this inner space, which we've sort of put in the back burner. And then there's the season that you talked about. I wrote an article. I was fascinated a couple of years ago about circadian medicine. I wrote an article about, I think it was called "Are We Seasonal Breeders?" And it talked about how before we had fire and before we had lights, which was very recent, that we actually were seasonal breeders. That if we didn't, breed in the spring and have our baby in the fall, then that baby would be born. You'll breed in the spring and then have our babies in the spring, or breed in the summertime and have our babies in the spring. Actually, how it works. Baby would be born in the fall, right before this crazy winter, and the survival rates were really low. That's why most mammals, they do exactly that. They have their babies in the spring. And melatonin is the molecule that regulates those light-dark cycles. And they found studies in when they first, in the 1800s, they went to the Inuits and they didn't have light and very little fire and all that. They found that they were all breeding exactly at the right time, all having their babies in early spring. It was something that was just such a part of the rhythms of nature. And still to this day, the vast majority of babies are born in the spring versus every time of the year. And I was born out of whack in August sometime. But the point being is that, was there any, I get this question all the time, I'm sure you do too, is like, when should I get pregnant and what season is the best? And is there anything you can comment on that from the Ayurvedic perspective, that those are part of the rhythms and we can lock in at a better time?
Yeah, I think every individual notices that they have a particular season that they feel most alive in. So yeah. I think as the years go by, you start to notice that.
Yeah.
And whatever the origin of that is, if it's cosmic, if it's, your, the way you ate, all these things.
Talk more about the season then. Let's talk about, I want to dive into that a little bit, because that's I think, so interesting.
So the season of when is really the right time for a person?
Well, just the season from how you wrote it in your book. That's the next thing, right?
Yeah. So when, obviously in the spring, the qualities are different. So we're in spring right now at the time that we're chatting, and the climate where I live, for example, is one way, and the climate where you live is another way. That where I live, it's we're in California, so the moisture level tends to be higher, and the moisture level being better, that would be perhaps more optimal for a Vata person to have a child in the spring. So, in the spring, if you live in a climate where it is more wet and juicy at that time of year, then that would obviously be a better time of year for someone with a lot of dryness in their body to conceive, if they were having some imbalances of dryness. And in the summer seasons, for women who tend to have those really, hot-blooded bodies, the Pitta types, where the blood volume might be higher and they might be experiencing, on a regular basis, very heavy periods or very frequent periods because of that level of blood volume and production in their body, then the summer might not be the best time for them to conceive, because that's just going to go up even more. So just making sure that the energies are as balanced as possible, and understanding when your body tends to go out of balance more in certain seasons. And obviously, like if you're a kapha person and you do have a more wet body, or a more sort of heavy body, that lightness that happens in the fall season, that crackly thing that happens with the leaves, and the dry qualities that happen in the fall might be better for a kapha person to conceive at that time of year. But that is all, dependent on how well they already understand how to balance their bodies in those seasons. So I think that's kind of that word. I love the word kala, season in Sanskrit, because it means time, it means season. It has so many interesting meanings. And I think that's the poetry of Ayurveda is just so beautiful, because, when you learn a new word, it really makes you feel and experience a little more than a word that you said 1,000 times in your own language, and it kind of touches the heart more. So we have these calendars that we all run based on, with numbers on them and months and things like that. But meanwhile, the sun's doing the sun's doing its thing, and the plants are doing their thing, and, the angles of the sun and the moisture moving and the wind moving at certain times of the day, and just starting to pay attention to those more. There's a big movement with women right now, actually. I know you've heard the term rewilding, because I think you had somebody on your podcast that was talking about that once. And for women, it's coming up in a different forms, but a lot of it is getting more in touch with the menstrual cycle and paying attention to the moon more. And I found that happened to me just organically as I started to learn about Ayurveda. I just was like, what's going on with the moon? And I started putting it on my calendar and, paying attention to it, where I just didn't pay attention to it before. And there is a movement now of women doing that, where, maybe I kind of was a little earlier on that. They didn't have apps. They probably have apps for it now.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. So is that a thing? So should women have their cycle with the full moon? Is that a thing? So many women ask me that all the time. And should they train our cycle to the moon, or I'm sure there's not a right or a wrong way, but I'm just curious what you have to say about that, because this is a common question, right?
What I noticed in my practice is that women are all over the map.
Yeah.
And me personally, I sometimes am in sync with the moon, and sometimes I'm not in sync with the moon. And whether we should, I know that my teacher, so one of my mentors is Dr. Sarita Shrestha. And certainly that was one of the things that she taught us. She taught us a lot of amazing things about even what you were talking about earlier with the home environment and things like that for women, and the culture that we have and how women exist within that culture. For example, my teacher in Nepal, they live in multi-generational families. So when a woman has her cycle, so you might have, the grandparents, then the parents of the child and the child all living in the same house together, doing their work, and obviously when you're in your middle part of your life, you're stronger and able to do more work and things like that than when you're, say in your 80s, right? So it makes sense that you'd want to have the middle-agers available to do the most amount of work at that time. But for women, there is this very unique period of the month, and also having a baby, there's unique situations where women do need a little bit of a different space to go through something, to let something process. And in these multi-generational families in Nepal, they actually have a room in the house where the women would go when they're on their cycle. And I know when I first heard this, I was thinking, no, they're putting the women down, they're not letting them do their work. But the way she told us it's actually experienced is, no, they get to go and work on all their creative projects. like that it's a privilege, and that the women each month, they save up all their creative projects for that month, and they go and work on them when they get their period. And I just found that to be such an inspiring idea that, connecting back up with the moon, it doesn't have to be that your life is getting disrupted. You can actually figure out how to create a lot of beauty with it. So yeah, I think there's this movement happening right now where women want to get more connected up with the cycles of the moon. They want to get connected up with the seasons more. And also that word kala is so big because it also talks about the time of life. So it encompasses all of those things. It's not, my stopwatch on my iPhone, but understanding that there are certain times of the year, the month, the life that are more optimal. And yeah, there's a general good and bad to follow, but because we don't have the kind of structured society, we don't live homogeneously. We don't all live the same lives. We all have different kinds of jobs. We all have, like I'm home sheltering in place right now. I don't have to go bag groceries in the grocery store. My lifestyle is really different than someone else's. So the right time is really different for each person. If we had really similar lives and really similar cultural rhythms, then I think some of these things would be more universal. But because our culture is so mixed and we have so many different kinds of lifestyles, I would say, yes, probably in a world where we were not creating all these micro cultures, that women probably would be more synced up with the moon, and that the cycles probably would sync up.
Yeah, maybe I think it's a beautiful concept to look at the cycle in terms of the timing, in terms of, the length of the cycle, the quality of the cycle, the quality of ovulation, the second half of the cycle where the rubber meets the road oftentimes are really important things to evaluate. And if bringing your body into balance gets you a regular cycle, a smoother, menstrual flow, less PMS, and maybe even aligned with the moon, maybe all where we need to go. We have a lot of distractions that are way out of our control. Lights, we turn them on at 6 o'clock at night and they're on till 10 o'clock at night if we're good, right? And that's, 4 or 5 hours of melatonin that you don't produce just because of that. So we're off the bat living in against the grain, against the current kind of a lifestyle with our circadian rhythm. So those circadian rhythms include, the monthly cycles as well. So I think you're right. I think if you put it all together into a real circadian clock and where we're really living in sync with nature without the distractions, which are just part of the culture now, I think some amazingly different things would happen. You mentioned the last one was water, right? So real quickly on water, what's the takeaway there?
Yeah, so obviously when you're a woman, a lot of the women who are concerned about their fertility are, over 30, over 35, some over 40. And there's a lot of focus on, okay, should I go get my hormones checked? Right? So water being the carrier for the hormones. So the hormones being carried, messages from the brain being sent to the organs, the hormones are little messengers that are telling certain parts of the body to do something. And it's the water that brings that. Water is also, kind of a form of love and affection, right. And mixing in Ayurveda. And what I've experienced a lot in my practice is women coming to me going, okay, I'm 38 years old. Should I go freeze my eggs? Because they hear that that's a thing. Or should I go get my hormone levels tested? And personally, I know what that's like because I did that. When I was, 38, I was going, I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if he's ready. I was going through kind of a different issue. And I said, let me go make sure I'm good. So I did actually go run my follicle stimulating hormone and my luteinizing hormone, the FSH and the LH. And so when women come to me because they want to prepare their bodies to be ready to become a mother, to be ready to receive life, they say, should I go check my hormones? And I go, you don't have to, but if it's going to put your mind at ease, go for it. Because once your mind starts cooking up all these what ifs, sometimes you do need a good data point to put it at rest. But there's also an alternative, which is you can also learn to pay attention to your body, because there are signs of health that you can look for. And, you know, I one of the things that I write about in my book, speaking of water and lubrication, since we're talking about reproduction, obviously you can't forget that part. And there are a lot of women who get the idea that they want to become pregnant, but then they're not even attracted to their partners. They're not actually, you know, experiencing the signs of attraction, physical signs of attraction for their partners. And I find that happens a lot with women in my practice. So part of it is getting women to understand the physical signs that are going on, because sometimes women are actually thinking they want to have a child because they see everybody else around them doing it, or they think it's something that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that can be really confusing. Or it can be like, oh, she did it, so I should do it. Or she did that, I want that. There's something wrong with me if I don't do that. So there's a lot of mental component to it, but the body is always the winner when it comes to fertility and paying attention to what's happening with the body. So women will notice that their cervical mucus changes throughout the month. Some of them may not notice that at all. So like a Vata body may just be very dry the entire time, you know, or a Kapha body, they may notice that just extremely high levels of moisture all the time. So if there is a dosha that's out of balance, sometimes it is a little bit harder to detect those classic signs of whether you're fertile at a certain time of the month. But yeah, water is, you know, mixing, it's the poetry of love and connection and affection. And, you know, one of the things I love about the Ayurvedic cleansing systems, you know, when people go through panchakarma, I love the fact that it starts with this lubrication phase, because that's the sweetness that is necessary to endure. Usually, you know, going through a cleanse is not an easy thing, right? So the job of the water is to bring the sweetness and the comfort and the love, so that the difficult stuff can be endured that's going to come later. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes, I think of water just like you said. It's all about love, and the hormones you said are carried by the water, and oxytocin being one of the big ones is the bonding, loving, giving, caring hormone. And I think that part of the preparation in pregnancy is to really give yourself completely and fully to that other person. It's not a physical relationship anymore, although that can be expressed, but it's a bonding at a much, much deeper level. It's a bonding of trust, where you've trusted yourself to open yourself up in such a delicate way that you give yourself so fully to that other person, and they feel so safe in that love that they do the same. And that's a communication based on true love. And I think that is that's what water is all about. That's what oxytocin is all about. And I think that sets up the field. And I guess from water you go right back to the field, and you keep setting these things up to make them better and better. Because when you, like you said, if you could marry someone and you have babies because you kind of sort of think you should, or everybody else is doing, or you think it might actually have a baby will help save our marriage. If we had a kid to love or a puppy, then it would help our marriage a little bit and make things better. And it can sometimes, but in the long run, it never does. You have to do the work on, yourself to take off your armor so you feel safe to give yourself fully to the other person. And I think that's really the beautiful thing of a family, raising a family, and is learning. It doesn't mean you all have to have it before you start the process, but you have to be committed to, and it helps to be committed and be aware of that process going into it. That this is a journey not just for raising kids. Those kids are gonna teach you how to be you. And if you take on that challenge, then you all grow in the process. So it's an incredible journey. And I feel like with 6 children, I'm still growing every day, and didn't know anything when we started this whole journey. So, but I think if you're committed to what Ayurveda preaches, first and foremost is first establish being, and then act from there. Doesn't mean we all get it right away, but you can't lie to yourself forever. You can't pretend that it's one way when it's not forever. And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about your book, the Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility, is that you give so many tips and so many strategies to help people get connected, and to also navigate through the potential imbalances and roadblocks along the way of having their baby and starting their family. It's really, really great. Just in closing, Heather, are there things that we need to talk about more that are really important for you to share with everybody? And for someone looking like, why this book, right? What is it about this book that you need to let them know why they should read this book? Because I think it's an incredible work, and I think everybody should read it if they're ready to start a family or have a family. But I'd love to hear from you, like, why this book, and what's your parting words for everybody so they understand what you're really trying to get at here.
I think this book for me is really a mission, and it's about something bigger than you and me, and that we can learn how to care for ourselves in our environment. And through us learning to care for ourselves in our environment, when we are tasked with becoming parents and we have a child, Ayurveda teaches the very basic principles of how you know someone is healthy. It's like complete no-brainer stuff that somehow we have forgotten. But when you have a child who can't talk and who's a baby because they don't know how to speak yet, you will be able to read whether or not your child is healthy without them speaking to you. You will be able to notice. And we really, really, really need parents to have these skills in our society and in our culture today, because if we can care for ourselves better, we will care for our children better, and we will have a better society overall. So to me, this book is so much bigger than, just go get, healthy before you get pregnant. This book really is, we are making a better group of little kids that are going to create a better society. So I hope that people get a sense of there being something bigger with the work that we're doing with this book.
That's true Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not about, it's always about the whole, is much greater than the sum of the parts, right? And it's always truly about that. So I'm so grateful that you were able to bring that message, because that's really the critical message. And that family unit has to be really balanced from the inside out for us to really enjoy the family that we're all trying to create, so beautiful. So how can folks learn more? How can they get the book? Where can they find out more about it and find out more about you?
So my website is www.heathergrzych.com, and my last name is spelled Grzych. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and IndieBound. So it's available May 5th. And again, heathergrzych.com. And those are the main places, I'd say.
And the book is the Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. Thank you so much for writing this book. And everybody definitely don't miss this book. It's a really important book and should be on your shelf. If you're thinking about having a family, this book definitely needs to be on your shelf. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Heather, for coming.
Wonderful being here with you.
Good. Thank you. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.